I'm chasing fire, and I'm never burning out.
All right, so I've been wanting to do a tips and tricks on just coloring, just the process when it comes to color grading your footage, whether it be for YouTube, be for TV, or maybe even a short film or documentary here and there. I take a lot of pride in coloring the footage. I'm not a big fan of LUTS. I understand that every now and then you're in a rush, you need to go and you need to lay something down. That is great. But there's something about taking your time and actually doing it yourself by hand. This is going to be very basic tips that you can do to start grading your footage right now. Like always, I like to keep my stuff organized. I like to start off with bins. I'm a big believer in keeping your stuff organized. So the first bin we'll do SEQ for sequence. We'll do footage in this one, and then we'll do music in this one. Even though this project probably will not have music or anything like that, but hey, it's just kind of out of habit. All right, so in sequence, I am going to create a new sequence. So a way that you can do it is you can right click inside the bin, or this little page pill new item, you can add a sequence. So this sequence is going to be set at 24 frames a second. TV, it's 29.97 or 30 frames a second, but everything I do for digital, social media, whatever it may be, outside of TV will be at 24 frames a second. So now that we have our sequence set, we will title it Color. Save it. Command S is going to be your best friend, not just for coloring, but anything you do with an editor, whether it be Premiere, it be Photoshop, it be After Effects. Command S, Control S, depending on if your Mac or PC, is going to be your best friend. Up here at the top, you will see editing, color effects, tabs up here. Adobe has done a really good job of breaking these down depending on what you were trying to do. So obviously what we're going to do is past the editing. This is more of the end of the edit. We're going to add color. So we'll go over here to the color tab. So before we can color, we gotta have footage. So we will double tap that, and I already have some footage set aside here that I will drag and drop. All right, so I'm going to just put an in and out point just to grab some footage and drag it down here to the timeline. I'm gonna zoom in on this footage just a bit, just so that I can have some detail, so see what I'm working with. So one of the first things you need to do whenever you're coloring your footage is go back to the sequence folder and add a new item. You're going to add an adjustment layer. One thing with the adjustment layer is it's going to come in handy whenever you're coloring, and I'll get into the details of why to use an adjustment layer versus going directly to the footage itself. So adjustment layer, anything below that adjustment layer is going to be impacted. So the best rule of thumb is to really have that adjustment layer up on an additional layer. Editing, we'll make sure that everything is edited inside that layer. We want to make sure that's highlighted. Over here on the right side of the screen, you have basic color correction, creative, curves, and vignette. Those are the 4 places that I'm really going to focus on whenever I color. First thing I want to do is curves. I'm going to add what I call a simple S-curve. And this is something to bring out the highlights and also darken the blacks. So S-curve will start right here. We'll go up, and as you can imagine, it makes an S. As you can tell, the blacks are really dark, but don't worry about that. We'll definitely get that fixed here in a second. So boom, first thing we want to do, S-curve. Check, that is out of the way. Go back to basic color correction. Over here, the temperature and tint, that is for white balance. A lot of times you may be in a hurry, you may need to hurry up and get something shot, but you don't have the right temperature dialed in on your camera. Adobe does a pretty good job as far as being able to try and get that close to the correct setting. Is it perfect? No, but it does do the job. All right, so as you can see in this image, there's a lot of yellow. So what we're going to do is try to remove some of that yellow by using this color. Temperature. All right, so we're gonna add just a little bit of blue there, just to take out some of that yellow. We'll go and add a little bit of purple, just to replace some of that skin tone that we took out whenever we added the blue. All right, so next thing I want to do is mess with the shadows, since we had a lot of the blacks went really, really dark and real harsh. So I'm going to boost the shadows a little bit to make it not so harsh. Next thing I want to do is my highlights. I got some areas up here that's a little bit that's a little bright from doing the S-curve, so the highlights just boost those down. By looking at this, the image is a little soft with doing the shadows and the highlights, so we want to boost the contrast just to bring some of those blacks a little harsher right there. And also boost the exposure just a bit to make it, boom, perfect. All right, so now let's look at before and after. So the adjustment layer, boom, we just turn it off and on right there, or we can turn the layer off and on. Take a look, so before, after, before, after. So we're getting there with the image. Next thing I want to do is take it to the creative tab. So the creative tab, there is faded film, sharpness, and your saturation. So I shoot everything flat. So basically whenever I shoot, there is no color or very little to an image. It looks really desaturated. So what I'm able to do in post is really bring that saturation back. We're going to mess with the saturation just a bit because we don't want to overdo it. You can easily overdo the saturation if you're not careful. All right, looking pretty close. We'll add sharpness, not too much. We'll save that. We'll see what that looks like. Pretty good. Turn the layer off, on, and we're getting there. All right, so the next thing I want to do is, with this being just a sit-down interview, the main focus is obviously our subject, is we can add a vignette. I don't usually add vignettes for a lot of things but my interviews, mainly because I want the image to be pointed towards the center, and by adding that vignette, that darkness on the outside is going to be able to help with that. All right, we won't add too much. Add the feather so it's more of a gradient add so you can't fully tell, and we'll take before and after. Before and after. So that is just a few simple steps that you can start doing today to really help your footage in the long run. And this can be anything from a YouTube video to a documentary to something that's going to play on the news. This is something that is very, very simple to do and takes 5-10 minutes to really get in there and start doing it. And of course, the more you do it, the quicker you're gonna get at it, and the better that your footage is gonna start looking. Of course, you can go a lot deeper in this, and maybe I will sometime go a little bit deeper into what all we can do with this. Well, you know, adding film grain and stuff like that, that's really gonna help that image a little bit more. But for the most part, just these simple steps: S-curve, your shadows, your color temperature, and making sure your highlights and your shadows are just right, and then add a little bit of sharpness to your image. And then of course, if it's an interview, you can add that vignette just to really make it pop and make the focus right there on your subject versus the things around it. So until next time.